Hello, I'm Katerina Nestorenko. Today's topic, Ukraine is responding firmly and directly. The Ukrainian armed forces are striking Bryansk region with HIMARS and Neptunes. They are destroying the key Luch power plant in Belgorod. Communications have collapsed and command is in chaos. Russians are being urged to urgently turn on Starlink terminals. They're afraid of our strikes. Is Akhmat not surrendering? Kadyrovites released from captivity said they surrendered without a fight because their commanders simply ran away. They searched and finally found someone. The FSB has claimed that a Ukrainian was involved in the assassination attempt on General Alekseev. But there are some nuances. NATO openly says that a ceasefire in Ukraine is not in their interest. Russia is preparing a new summer offensive in Zaporizhzhia. And Orban calls us enemies. Greece has arrested an Air Force colonel for spying for China. Meanwhile, Beijing is refusing to participate in nuclear talks with the US and Russia. Sweden and Denmark are giving us special Shahed hunters to close the skies from Russian drones. All this and more in just a few seconds. But right now, please like this video and subscribe to our channel Ukraine Today so you don't get lost on YouTube. Well then, let's get started. Belgorod was left without heat after a strike by the Ukrainian armed forces. On the evening of February 7th, Ukrainian forces struck energy facilities in the border regions of the Russian Federation. There is a blackout in Belgorod. About 80,000 people are without heating and thousands are without gas and electricity.
Attention, this is an emergency alert. Dawn danger, dawn danger. You must go to a basement or an underground area immediately. Dawn danger. Please seek shelter in a secure location, stay away from all windows, and remain underground until the situation is safe. I repeat, dawn danger is occurring, so move to a basement or underground area now.
The key Luch CHP plant suffered serious damage. The external protection has been destroyed. The station is vulnerable to new attacks. Another 3,000 are without gas and 1,000 without electricity. Radiators are bursting and leaking. Authorities are urgently opening heating centers. At the same time, the AFU struck Bryansk region with Neptune and HIMARS missiles. In several settlements, heating and power supply have been disrupted. In Novorossiysk, reports came in about explosions at the local port. Let me remind you that there is the base of the Russian Federation's fleet.
There was a powerful explosion, there was smoke. I don't know if it was a drone that flew in or a missile that was launched. Mom said a missile was launched. There was a powerful, very powerful explosion.
This is Ukraine's mirrored response to Russia's massive strikes on our energy infrastructure. The Russians tried to freeze Ukrainians with hundreds of drones and dozens of missiles, but the armed forces of Ukraine are showing that this game can go both ways. We will strike Russia as long as they strike us. Reading the comments under previous episodes, I see that many of you are watching us from Kazakhstan, Moldova, Europe, and even the USA. We Ukrainians are very grateful for your support and proud to have such reasonable viewers. Write under this episode which country you're watching us from and whether your country supports our fight against the empire of evil. I always enjoy reading your comments. And now, let's continue. The most interesting part is coming up.
In just one night, in a single night, we were thrown back to the Stone Age. This video I will only upload when I am able to. That is, Elon Musk has shut down the internet along the entire front line. In other words, we can't use Starlink. Now, only those people who can verify their personal information can use Starlink, as I understand it. That is to say, the Pythons can use it without any problems. We are completely unable to operate at this time because we have absolutely no communication or network connection. We simply have no way to connect in order to effectively coordinate our rockets. Of course, there is a way out of this situation. So we wait.
Russia is still in a panic over the mass Starlink shutdown. Z military correspondents are already urging Russian soldiers to completely turn off all devices. They're afraid that Ukrainian defense forces are collecting data on the locations of active terminals and striking them. Russian boys are also being warned not to send money if someone promises to unlock it for them. Starlink. They say these are scammers. All terminals for Russians are blocked and it's time to just forget about them. For almost 4 years now, we've been hearing that Kadyrov's men never surrender. This is claimed both by Ramzan Don Kadyrov himself and his henchmen. But this legend has started to crack. A crack in the form of 20 Akhmat fighters, who not only surrendered, but surrendered without a fight because
their commander has abandoned them, leaving them alone to face the consequences of a battle they were never prepared for. It is a betrayal that no one saw coming, and now they must wait here in the silence, wondering if anyone will ever come to their rescue. They are just waiting for a sign of hope that may never arrive.
The battalion commander, the deputy chief of staff, and other officers too? Yes.
They ran away immediately.
Where did they run to?
They ran into the forest.
They abandoned the people? Yes.
They left them.
They abandoned you and the soldiers?
Yes, they ran into the forest.
These 20 Kadyrovites returned home during the latest prisoner exchange.
We are truly grateful to our wonderful city, spirit of Akhmat, unwavering faith, vast land of Russia, and the trials of war.
But what's most interesting is that, along with the tale that Kadyrovites never surrender, the commander of Akhmat insisted that he would not take back any fighters who had surrendered voluntarily. Moreover, Abdi Alaudinov advised captured Kadyrovites to do everything possible to get themselves killed.
I have a question.
Those of you who surrendered voluntarily, how deluded must you be to think that I would ever petition or ask or do anything to get you out of that captivity? In fact, I have absolutely no respect for you at all. I don't think you deserve anything, not even life itself. Honestly, I am completely amazed after you just raised your hands and surrendered so easily like little girls. How do you even plan to go on living with yourselves after this? How will you look your family in the eye? How will you look your children, grandchildren in the eye? Seriously. Even now, while you're in captivity, just stand up, grab something, a pen, a nail, attack someone, do whatever it takes to get yourself killed. At the very least, by doing that, you could conclude your journey as honorable men, even at this late hour.
What do you think? At what point did the legend of Akhmat start to go downhill? As the saying goes, if you seek, you shall always find. But if we're talking about Russia, there's always a but. Let me explain. Remember just the other day in Moscow, General Vladimir Alekseev almost got cobs on it? The deputy head of Russian military intelligence was almost shot, but unfortunately he survived. Immediately after the assassination attempt, Russian propaganda started claiming that Ukraine wanted to eliminate their top military official. At the same time, Kyiv denied any connection to the failed assassination. But the Kremlin stubbornly tried to find a Ukrainian trace in this story. And they did find one, well, almost. The day before, the FSB detained suspects in the attempt on Alexiev's life. One of them, Lyubomir Korba, managed to escape to Dubai, where he was actually caught. His accomplice, Victoria Vasina, was detained in Moscow. Another assistant to the killer, Zinaida Serebrytskaya, is said to have fled to Ukraine. And here's the most interesting part. All three are citizens of the Russian Federation. But the FSB doesn't give up and keeps insisting on a Ukrainian connection. They did manage to find a lead after all, although it's more like they just made it up. The investigative committee of the Russian Federation claims that the main culprit, the killer Korba, is originally from Ukraine.
The identity of the perpetrator has been established. A few hours after committing the crime, he left Russia and flew to the United Arab Emirates. He is a native of the Ternopil region of the Ukrainian SSR, now a citizen of the Russian Federation, Lyubomir Korba, born in 1960. As a result of measures taken by operatives of the FSB, the Russian Ministry of Internal Affairs, and investigators from the Investigative Committee, as well as the competent authorities of the United Arab Emirates, the suspect was detained and brought to the Russian Federation. It has been established that Korba arrived in Moscow at the end of last December on assignment from the Ukrainian Special Services to carry out a terrorist attack.
But the target of the failed assassination attempt, General Alekseev, is also originally from Ukraine, from the Vinnytsia region. And as for how many Kremlin officials were born and raised in Ukraine, I couldn't even count them. By that logic, hypothetically, Kirill Dmitriev could be a threat to Putin. His father still lives in Kiev. So against this backdrop, one shouldn't forget the theory that Alexiev's own people wanted to get rid of him, for example, because of his close cooperation with the rebel Yevgeny Prigozhin. It was Alekseev who recorded videos with the founder of the Wagner Group during his march on Moscow. And what do you think? Who wanted to get rid of the deputy head of the GRU and for what reason? Russia is preparing a new offensive. Analysts from the Institute for the Study of War write that as early as this spring, Russia will deploy strategic reserves that it has been preparing since 2025.
In their review, the analysts refer to the forecast of military observer Konstantin Mashevets, who believes that the new, large-scale Russian offensive could begin as early as April and will be focused on the Slovyansk, Kramatorsk or Orekhiv-Zaporizhzhia directions.
But at the same time, the Institute doubts that Russia will be able to realize its ambitious plans given the current situation. The occupiers have a lot of problems at the front. At
present, the occupiers are stuck at the level of tactical objectives and are not achieving any success in the specified directions.
But while Russia is making new grand plans, the Ukrainian armed forces are epically pulverizing the enemy's depots and command posts. The General Staff has confirmed successful strikes on military targets in the temporarily occupied territory of the Zaporizhzhia region. This refers to a command post, a warehouse, and a concentration of enemy personnel. In
particular, on the night of February 8th, the enemy unit's logistics supply train was struck near the temporarily occupied Rozovka in the Zaporizhzhia region. Yesterday, in the area of the settlement of Krasnogorskaya, also in the Zaporizhzhia region, a concentration of enemy personnel was hit. Also in the Donetsk region, near the settlement of Novoekonomikesko, an enemy UAV command post was struck.
The occupiers' supply lines are being successfully destroyed by Ukraine's defense forces, even along the front line. Kamikaze drones from the 3rd Army Corps burned a truck. A ground robotic complex destroyed an enemy antenna. The crews also performed epically. Lazar's group of the National Guard of Ukraine. In the Zaporizhzhia direction, they destroyed a BM-21 Grad multiple rocket launcher system, and with a second drop, they also destroyed the vehicle's ammunition load. They are also destroying enemy supply lines in the southern Slobozhansky direction. Operators of strike drones from the Guard Border Brigade destroyed 8 vehicles that the enemy used to transport ammunition and personnel. They also managed to hit communication equipment, and of course, enemy manpower as well. I never cease to admire the courage and heroism of Ukrainian soldiers. They are holding the front and standing up to a huge horde that vastly outnumbers them. That's why I urge everyone to support the armed forces of Ukraine. And if you can't do it financially, write them words of support in the comments. I know they're watching us. The General Staff of Ukraine has confirmed a strike on the Kapustin Yar training ground from where Russia launches its notorious Oreshnik at our country. Facilities servicing ballistic missiles have been damaged. Yes, this is a resounding slap from the Ukrainian armed forces personally to the war criminal Putin.
Kapustin Yar is the place from where hundreds of missiles are launched at Ukraine. That's also where the infamous Oreshnik is launched from. But could it really be the end for Putin's most terrifying weapon?
Ukrainian Flaminda missiles shattered the Kapustin Yar test site into pieces. The very facility from which the Oreshnik was launched has been reduced to ruins. In
the course of January, Ukraine's defense forces carried out strikes on the test site, Kapustin Yar in Russia's Astrakhan region.
What's important is that the strike coincided with the negotiation process in Abu Dhabi. This significantly increased the agency of the Ukrainian negotiating delegation. This is extremely significant. It is a major informational, political and military blow to the Russian Federation. Let me remind you, Oreshnik was used as a tool of military political pressure not only on Ukraine, and now it turns out that Oreshnik itself is within the strike range of the Ukrainian Flamingo ballistic missile.
We're talking about the test range's infrastructure, specifically a complex of hangar-type buildings where pre-launch preparations for intercontinental ballistic missiles are carried out. That's where the main strike hit. Regardless
of whether the launches were destroyed or not, the destruction of the pre-launch hangar for Oreshnik's preparations. This is a very serious blow to the positions of the Russian Federation in terms of their ability to use it in the short-term historical perspective. Oreshnik specifically from the Kapustin Yar test range. In other words, it is now effectively within the strike range of the Ukrainian defense forces. And this fundamentally changes the entire balance of power.
But what's important is this. Among the means of destruction was a Ukrainian-made missile, which, with a certain probability, could have destroyed Putin's ballistic missiles.
We can expect that in the near future, the Ukrainian side may respond adequately to the missile terror from the Russian Federation. First and foremost, we are talking about striking legitimate military targets on the territory of the occupying country. Oil refineries are enterprises of the energy sector, and accordingly, stationary targets are enterprises of the Russian military-industrial complex.
Another point is the distance and depth. According to the data, the probable accuracy of the Flamingo missile is about 160 meters, and its warhead is even superior. American Tomahawks.
It is precisely the Flamingo, with a strike range of over 3,000 kilometers. According to reports from both Ukrainian intelligence and Western partners, its production is already being scaled up to 2 units per day. This is a weapon of retribution. This is what the Ukrainian side will now use to respond adequately to any terrorist act by the aggressor country.
But what is surprising is Russia's so-called unparalleled air defense system. Kapustin Yar is a strategic military facility, practically the only one of its kind in all of Russia. And, as is customary, such sites are supposed to be protected.
Yet the Russian air defense turned out to be completely unprepared to repel strikes, even against such a strategic military site as the Kapustin Yar testing range. Let me emphasize again, Ukrainian ballistic missiles traveled almost the entire territory of the Russian Federation outside the range of air defense systems. And this represents both reputational and military losses for the Russian Federation.
But the main question is, what could have happened to Oreshnik after such an attack?
Apparently, the hangar has been destroyed, along with the ability to carry out pre-launch operations. At this moment, the Russian side does not have them. The critical test site infrastructure and, first and foremost, the essential pre-launch preparation workshops and the primary launch pads have apparently suffered such extensive and severe structural damage that it could effectively paralyze the very use of this entire test site for a very long time to come.
It seems that Moscow is in danger. There will be more missiles produced in Ukraine. The manufacturer, Flamingo, has announced the completion of testing for the new FP-7 and FP-9 ballistic missiles, which can reach Moscow from St. Petersburg.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
The day before, we reported that a peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia could supposedly be reached as early as March. Well, at least that's what Reuters writes. So, there's an update to these forecasts. Not March, of course, but in the next 4 months, a ceasefire is possible. And Associated Press writes that this is exactly how much time Zelensky and Putin have to reach an agreement. If not, then Trump will increase pressure on both Ukraine and Russia. But there are also those who don't want the war to end as soon as possible, but quite the opposite. For example, the head of the Munich conference, Wolfgang Ischinger. He is convinced that a ceasefire in Ukraine poses a risk for NATO.
As long as Ukraine is defending Europe, the danger is not as great, explained the head of the MSC.
According to him, this means that the Russian army is focused on conducting military operations against a neighboring country. The Russian armed forces are losing thousands of soldiers every week, Ischinger pointed out. As soon as a ceasefire is achieved in Ukraine, the situation will change, the Der Tagesspiegel interviewee believes. In that case, Russian President Vladimir Putin will be able to continue rearming during peacetime, and the threat to NATO countries on the eastern flank will increase. Well,
thank you. At least you admitted that Ukraine is defending Europe. And what do you think about this statement? Ukraine is now officially an enemy of Hungary. Seriously? Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban publicly called Ukraine an enemy while speaking on February 7th at a party event of his political force Fidesz in the city of Szombathely. According to Putin's buddy, Ukraine allegedly keeps demanding that Brussels cut Hungary off from cheap Russian energy. He stated that this would lead to a sharp increase in utility rates for Hungarian families.
As long as Ukraine is doing this, I apologize, but it is our enemy. Ukraine is challenging our fundamental interests.
Orban also emphasized that for Hungary, maintaining good relations with Russia and refusing any participation in the war against Putin is a matter of national security. A matter of national security. In addition, he stated that Budapest will not send troops to Ukraine as long as his Fidesz party is in power. That's absolutely certain. Amid falling poll ratings, Orban's party is trailing behind the opposition TISA party led by Peter Magyar. The Prime Minister is sharply intensifying anti-Ukrainian and anti-Brussels rhetoric. He is once again frightening Hungarians with scenarios of being dragged into the war, from the outflow of Hungarian money to the possible conscription of Hungarian youth and the deployment of NATO troops on Ukrainian territory. At the same time, as reported by RIA Novosti, Orban stated that Hungary will raise the issue of mobilization in Ukraine in Brussels. He noted that Budapest will not tolerate the conscription of Transcarpathian Hungarians into the Ukrainian army and promises support for their families. What do you think of such friendly, neighborly relations from Orban? Share your thoughts in the comments. In Greece, an Air Force colonel has been arrested for espionage in favor of China. Greek authorities detained a 54-year-old Air Force colonel, a telecommunications specialist, who recently commanded a training unit. He specialized in communications and electronic systems. Previously, he served at the Air Force headquarters and had access to NATO's classified networks. According to the investigation, the colonel transmitted secret data to China through encrypted channels, specifically using a second mobile device. The information concerned NATO projects, air defense systems, including the modernization of the Patriot system, arms procurement, and military planning. The investigation was launched after a tip from Western intelligence, which warned their Greek counterparts about the leak. During interrogations, the colonel confessed and named his Chinese contact. He faces up to 20 years in prison. The investigation is now checking for the presence of an accomplice. It is possible that this is just part of a larger Chinese spy network in Europe. China will not participate in nuclear weapons negotiations. China's representative to the UN in Geneva, Tian Shen. He stated that China's nuclear capability is not comparable to that of the US and Russia, so Beijing currently sees no point in multilateral negotiations. According to him, the main responsibility for reducing arsenals lies with the states that possess the largest stockpiles of nuclear weapons. The US, in turn, continues to modernize its arsenal in order to negotiate from a position of strength. Secretary of State Marco Rubio emphasized that the previous agreements between the US and Russia no longer reflect reality. China has become a serious player, and Russia suspended its participation in the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty back in 2023. Meanwhile, Moscow declares its readiness to discuss nuclear arms reduction, but only with the participation of the United Kingdom and France. The end of the Shaheds. Sweden and Denmark are jointly funding the supply of special Trident Mark II anti-aircraft systems to Ukraine for effective counteraction against Russian Shaheds. Deliveries will begin within 12 months. Additionally, Ukraine's Minister of Defense, Mikhailo Fedorov, announced the creation of a Ukrainian anti-drone dome.
Here is this news. Ukraine will receive the first anti-aircraft systems within the next 12 months. The Trident Mark II systems are designed to destroy strike drones such as the Shahed. The supply of such unique anti-aircraft systems was funded by Sweden and Denmark as part of a joint initiative to strengthen Ukraine's air defense, with a total amount of about 226 million euros. This was announced at a joint press conference by the defense ministers of both countries, Poul Jonsson and Troels Lund. Poulsen, the Trident Mark II is a modern anti-aircraft system from Biosystems. At its core is a 40mm Bofors cannon, capable of hitting aerial targets at a distance of up to 12 to 13 kilometers, with a firing rate of 200 to 300 rounds per minute. The system itself is mounted on a civilian Scania truck chassis with a 6x6 wheel configuration, which allows for rapid deployment using public roads. The use of programmable Bofors 3P munitions makes it possible to destroy drones, cruise missiles, and helicopters with high precision by creating a cloud of shrapnel directly in front of the target.
This is one of the elements of the overall air defense system that will be developed in our country today. It's not some kind of miracle weapon, obviously. However, it is quite effective, at least according to its tactical and technical specifications, and it will really help us shoot down enemy aerial targets in what is known as low-altitude airspace. In other words, we're talking about UAVs like the Shahed or Geren, and also the Gerbera, among others.
The media reports that manufacturing a single Trident Mark II takes about 15 months, and some of the systems for Ukraine are already in production. It is expected that these anti-aircraft guns will become a relatively affordable and effective solution in the fight against Russian drones.
This is one of the elements of the air defense system that is currently being modernized in our country. Obviously, these elements today constitute the direct fight against the drones themselves, using conventional weaponry, including the anti-aircraft guns we're discussing. This also includes anti-missile equipment and weaponry. Accordingly, this also involves the use of interceptor drones and mobile fire teams.
The day before, Ukraine's Minister of Defense, Mikhailo Fedorov, announced the creation of a Ukrainian anti-drone shield.
On the President's orders, we are changing our approach to protecting the skies. The transformation of such a system does not happen in just a few days. But we need to start today in order to ultimately resolve this issue. Our task is to build an anti-drone shield over Ukraine, a system that doesn't react after the fact, but destroys the threat while it's still in the air.
According to Fedorov, the anti-drone shield is not about the future. It's about survival today and the possibility for Ukraine to develop even during wartime.
Accordingly, this is not the Israeli dome, and it's not Trump's future golden dome either. Obviously, whether that will happen is a question for the Americans, not for us. Today, we really do have, first of all, the country is very large. There are a lot of sites that need protection, but most importantly, it's about people's safety. And today, the artificial intelligence component in this collaborative work is being actively improved. We really do need to build, if not an air defense dome over our country, then at least do everything possible to protect ourselves from everything that comes flying from the Russian Federation.
No other country in the world has the kind of experience in countering aerial attacks that Ukraine does. Every day and every night, our country is attacked by hundreds of enemy drones. In 2025, Russia launched up to 100,000 Shaheds and other types of UAVs at Ukraine. That's why it's necessary to build a system that works not just in isolated spots, but across the entire country.
This is layered defense. This is not, well, let's put it this way, so that people tend to imagine it technically as some kind of coverage over the country, really like a dome, as everyone envisions it, or like an umbrella. But what we're actually talking about is layered defense. That is, this involves the work of small aviation, the work of large military aviation, and also includes interceptor drones, as I mentioned, as one element, as well as the use of classic air defense systems, and accordingly, operations in the air. This is exactly what aviation does, destroying aerial targets. This is ground-to-air operations.
The first step toward protecting Ukrainian skies has already been taken. Joint effort. The Ukrainian Ministry of Defense and SpaceX have blocked Starlink terminals for the Russians. The occupiers are massively complaining about being unable to restore communications, and this will affect the enemy's ability to coordinate actions along the entire front line. And this is just the beginning. So, over there in Russia, don't get too comfortable. Ukrainian defense is not weakening and is ready to respond at any moment. In Crimea, annexed by Russia, prices for food and basic goods have skyrocketed. The war and the economic crisis in the Russian Federation are fueling inflation. The most vulnerable citizens are suffering the most. What is happening on the occupied peninsula today, and how are the locals reacting? All the details are in our report. Noticeable changes in prices at grocery stores in Crimea, annexed by Russia, were observed at the beginning of the year. Can someone explain to me why food is so expensive in Crimea? Since January 1st, the Russian authorities have increased the value-added tax rate, which has triggered a rise in prices for almost everything.
The only thing is they tried to reassure people, they tried to say that the VAT increase was a necessary measure, that things will settle down soon, and overall the situation will improve. The rate of price growth will decrease by 2.6%. But even so, you understand, this is already manipulation by politicians when they start talking about a decrease in the rate of price increases.
Crimeans are actively filming videos in stores and complaining about rising prices.
Have you even seen the prices for dairy products? Milk is 113 rubles, yogurt 102, savushkin 91, and cream cheese 185. Potatoes and cabbage are 50, while salads range from 1 to 6 rubles. Cream cheese is 185 rubles. Those are to make sense of the prices for fruits and vegetables. Potatoes are 50 rubles. Cabbage is 22 rubles. Beets are 29 rubles per kilogram. A kilogram of apples cost me 210 rubles. Eggs are 95 rubles. Chicken breast fillet is 469 rubles per kilogram.
The price increases in Crimea hit pensioners first and foremost. In this footage, a blogger from Yalta, Elena Gukova, talks about the significant rise in prices not only for food, but also for medicine.
The most recent time that I bought the cholesterol medication, rosuvastatin, was back in the year 2025. it was 195 rubles. Well, I certainly didn't expect the price to go up this much. I actually thought that medicine prices wouldn't go up at all. These are medicines. You can't live without them. So I went to the pharmacy and just look at the price now. 250 rubles. The cheapest things used to be chocolate bars. They cost rubles. 79, I think. Those were the cheapest chocolate bars. Now they cost 200 rubles. 200 rubles. So the price has doubled.
At the moment, the inflation rate in annexed Crimea exceeds the average for Russia. The inflation index reached almost 107%. For Crimea, higher inflation has been a consistent trend throughout all the years of annexation. Experts, however, are convinced that the real level of inflation in Crimea may be significantly higher than the officially reported figure. The head of the Crimean Tatar Resource Center, Bryansk, explains that prices have indeed risen for almost all categories of goods. And it's not just food products.
Prices for dairy products have gone up. The quality of dairy products has decreased. Then prices for bread and bakery products have also increased. Building materials are expensive, construction is very costly, and
this price increase was influenced not only by the rise in VAT. There are a number of other reasons as well. One of the main issues is logistics. The lack of air connections, overloaded railways, and the prioritization of military transport directly affect the cost of services.
Crimea has always been subsidized. And moreover, when we talk about logistics, it means that products have to be delivered to Crimea, building materials have to be delivered to Crimea. During Ukrainian times, this was of course done by rail, by transport from Ukraine, from the mainland part of Ukraine, and so logistics were much simpler and prices were different as well.
An additional factor was Russia's war against Ukraine. The media reports that Crimea has become overloaded with military personnel, and mobilization and contract campaigns are creating a direct financial burden on local budgets.
There they start giving all sorts of explanations. Some people say that this is related in direct relation to the ongoing special military operation. It is clear that a substantial amount of extra financial expenditure on the army is absolutely required in this specific context, and so on.
Strikes on oil depots in Crimea have also contributed to rising prices.
First of all, there were serious problems due to the explosions at the oil depots. And when prices for gasoline began to rise significantly, and when there simply was a complete lack of available fuel, that also had a major impact. It also affected, let's say, the industrial and manufacturing production sectors. This influenced things like, for example, the agricultural harvest season during the autumn and so on. In other words, logistical issues.
Russia's oil and gas revenues are declining, most regional budgets are becoming deficit-ridden, and Crimea continues to exist solely thanks to federal subsidies. Given the overall economic problems in Russia, a further decline in the standard of living is also expected in subsidized Crimea.
Crimea is a subsidized region. Without external support, it is quite difficult for Crimea to survive. A lot here will depend on the overall economic situation of the Russian Federation itself. And we see that due to the sanctions policy, due to the budget deficit, due to the fact that indeed already in February they are falling short. The budget is suffering because of problems with selling oil and gas. The Russian Federation, its main source, is facing serious problems. And therefore, of course, this will also apply and have an impact on Crimea as well. I don't think we can talk about any improvement here. And
this kind of incredibly difficult and harsh life seems to emerge everywhere. That Russia chooses to set foot.
That's all for now. Please like this video and don't forget to subscribe to our channel Ukraine Today so you don't miss our next episodes. See you next time.